So, welcome to the November Planning and Environment Committee. We take this opportunity in NAIDOC week to pay particular attention to the responsibilities we have as the current governing body in this area to respect the great work that the traditional owners of this country did for millennia before there was such thing as a council, and to respect the elders, past, present and emerging, and take that into consideration in all we do. So we have a slightly late start, and for those who will be listening to the recording of this meeting, we have had technical issues, and so we were trying to get the live streaming activated, but that doesn't appear to be able to be done at this stage. So we have the first item is attendance and apologies. We note that the full complement of councillors are in attendance. Confirmation of minutes. This is something we don't normally do, but do we have to do it this time? We're setting history. So this is under the new legislation that minutes must be taken for all committee meetings, and therefore it's a requirement to confirm the minutes. There is a suggested manner of approaching that on your agenda, if someone would like to move that.
I'll move.
Move Councillor Stewart, seconder. Councillor Finzel, is there any discussion on this item? I'll take a vote. All those in favour? That was carried unanimously. There's no presentations, no deputations, so we move on to item 1, which is Operational Works 18.0150.01, request to change an existing approval for prescribed title works, Jetty at 21 Wesley Court, Noosa Heads. So do we have any questions of staff in regard to this matter? No?
Well, are there very many other jetties that have the docks that float up and down with the tide?
Not that many, Tom, no.
No.
You could probably count on one hand.
Yeah.
The number. There's a lot of boat lifting devices through Noosa Sound, but not the floating deck to access the boat.
Yeah, and then it also said it would, the jet ski pontoons there is a relatively new thing as well.
They've been around for a while. There's a lot more of them now, given the increase in use of jet skis and things like that. There's just a larger number.
Yeah. I wish that I don't like jet skis all that much. However, I guess it's good for the jet skis, you know. To maintain.
And they're relatively low key because they're only yay above the water level. If you put a jet ski on it, they're fairly low.
Yeah.
And I suppose there's other outcomes about not needing to anti-foul boats because they sit above the water, those sorts of things. But correspondingly, does the boat lifting device degrade environment? And it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah.
So from a council perspective, our interest is mainly aesthetics, and in your report you've said that you feel that this doesn't create an adverse impact, and obviously not going to interfere with any boating or other service. And it's something, is this likely to set a precedent in terms of other applications that may foresee this nature of mooring of boats and jet skis?
Yes, I think it would, but I think also the reasoning behind supporting this one does give us a bit of background if we go into others in the future, and the fact that this one is tucked in behind the jetty head, it's right in the frontage of the property owner rather than being isolated or out on the jetty head. So.
Yeah.
Now it seems like it is a good idea if you can get your boats out of the water easily, because scraping and pulling them out of the water, all that work ends up in the river.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Just in reference to condition 6 and condition 1, my question is, if the approved plans for one boat lifting device, why is condition 6 included? I just want an explanation on that. Is it because there's a concern that maybe the boat vendors boat lifting device? I just need to get my head around that.
I think it's a changing condition 6 to support a boat lifting device, but the way it's reworded so that we don't end up with an additional one again on the outside of that jetty structure. It's about
restricting it to one.
To one, yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
Thank you.
One more question. It says that this goes 900 millimeters further into the waterway than the original jetty, but this is in a canal. So is the rules concerning the canals significantly different than the rules with the river, with how far a jetty can go out?
Yeah, understanding that Noosa Sound, admittedly in a canal physically, is part of the river. It's completely different to Noosa Waters, in that Noosa Waters is a constrained area. So the state has key lines, distances that will allow you to go beyond your boundary into the river. That varies depending on location. So in this one, the state has looked at whether the extra 900 mil affects navigable use of the canal, and they've determined at this location that it doesn't. So they're quite comfortable with that.
I was just wondering if this is setting up a precedence in terms of another particular case that is on appeal, with a jetty going further out than they said it was going to be made into the Noosa River, but that won't have any effect on that.
No, they're quite different locations, so no.
And quite different uses, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone would wish to move the motion, move Councillor Stewart, second to Councillor Wegner. Any further discussion? All those in favour? That was unanimous. We move on.
Well done, thank you.
Move on to item 2, which is a request to change an existing approval for multiple housing, type 3 retirement and special needs, commercial premises, type 2 medical and reconfiguring a lot 1 into 2 at Grasstree Court and Ben Lexcen Drive, Sunrise Beach. So questions for staff on this one?
I've got a few. Is it Patrick?
It is.
It's just on the car parking. Is there, I'm just under car parking on page 21. Car parking should be provided within the sites generally as shown on the drawings. It's 4.1. I'm just confused. Apartment buildings, and it's got basement. So will there be basement car parking?
Associated with the 4 apartment buildings, which if you have a look at the appendix 1, which shows the site layout, I have it in front of me if you'd like to see. Oh, it's the appendix. Yeah, well, I don't know the page number of the agenda, probably page 35 maybe.
There we go.
35, okay.
So the buildings in
You might need to hop on.
in blue, which are not subject to this change application per se.
Yeah.
So we're talking about changes to this building.
Yeah.
There's some basement car parking in these buildings.
Okay.
So it's an undercroft car park for this building.
So it's only 6 beds. That's the change.
That's right, an additional 6 beds to that top building.
And so with the proposed car parking they need, is it existing is 288, proposed is 290, planning scheme 2006 says 179, and then there's a tick that says complies. Just so how many car parks will they actually have to have?
Under the planning scheme, for the whole of the development,
Yep.
they're only required to have 179. So they're providing well in excess of the amount that's required. And for this building, it's 26 spaces in accordance with the planning scheme,
Okay.
and they're providing 52.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thanks.
Other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. I've been contacted by some members of the public. They're just they've got concerns about clearing. Is this going to affect any more clearing of the land, or?
Well, the footprint of the building is changing slightly, and importantly, on this lot, there was a cluster of the glossy black fruit trees which have been to be protected in the eastern sort of corner of the site. Those trees are still being protected as part of this changed layout. So the food trees, the extent of food trees, glossy black fruit trees, is not changing in terms of those that are being retained.
Can I ask a question following up on that question? So, in regards to protection of the glossy bird's habitat, has council provided specific objectives to the developer? Is there a management plan approved by council that will minimise the impact of the vegetation clearance and allow them to monitor and at least liaise with the Sunrise Glossy team?
Yeah, there is a management plan that has been approved. It doesn't specifically go into, it does mention community engagement, but it's not stipulated which particular parties that they liaise with. There is a 8-to-1 ratio of replanting of glossy black food trees, and they're going to be, throughout the Sunshine Beach area and part of the nature refuge, Cooroy nature refuge too. So, but we're asking them to amend their ecological restoration plan to reflect the current staging, because stage 1 now only includes the top lot, which is lot 6. So we've asked in the conditions that they amend their ecological restoration plan to just focus on their current staging that they've applied for.
And is it comprehensive? Do you stipulate that the habitat restoration should consider overstory, understory and ground story protections? Or is it general?
Well, the trees, so the trees retained on site will be fenced off, and so that will be a no-go zone. So that will protect everything from the ground up to the tops of the canopy. So there'll be no works in that area.
And is there a penalty if they don't adhere with the management plan?
The standard penalties under the Planning Act will apply.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for us with this application to add a file note to the conditions that ask for specific objectives for the developer in context of monitoring and just ensuring that there is liaison with the Glossy group and that what has been promised to be followed actually does happen?
Yeah, look, we address that through conditions, and we've also our on-ground construction compliance team. We sort of look at that on when it's in operation. So the usual carrots and sticks exist in the Planning Act to make sure that they comply with their approvals, and where they don't, then we have to take compliance action. We can't anticipate whether they are going. We expect that they will comply, but then there's always that fallback to compliance action.
So do we have baseline numbers at the moment with the glossy blacks so that we know what's existing now? And
we do. We have it in our ecological report. I can send that through to you if you want.
That would be great.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that part kind of vegetation management operational works?
Yes, that's it.
Is that all? So what they must comply with is all part of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have a process when people have to do rehabilitation, they have to do on and off maintenance. So there's a period of time that they have to maintain it and look after it. And council officers actually go out and monitor it and make sure they comply with their approval. And it's not taken off maintenance until it complies. And we also hold a performance bond around conditions, which they're required to submit to council, and that's not returned until the end of that process. And that helps guarantee and reinforce those requirements that they are carried out. So I guess to answer Councillor Amelia's question, we probably wouldn't be consulting with the group so much because officers are playing that role, although I know our officers have a bit to do with that group already, so we are in touch with that group.
Yeah, and that's on page 33, condition 12.2.
Yeah.
And that's the one we're looking at right there.
Yes.
A minimum 5 years.
Yeah, and so I've been liaising with Blue Care to have we've got a nature refuge, Cooroy nature refuge that council manages, and there's various areas of that are degraded. So I've been liaising with them to get the material off this site, put it on the degraded side of the Cooroy nature refuge, and then have them manage it for 5 years, and then it's protected in perpetuity because it's a nature refuge. So that's the sort of outcome that I'm trying to achieve.
So when you're talking about material, are you talking about topsoil with all the seeds, etc., like they do on Stradbroke Island with sand mining in similar country, that you take the topsoil, place it elsewhere, and that generates a similar ecosystem if it's in the right conditions?
So there's been a lot of work on the glossies and a lot of knowledge sharing in the last couple of weeks here. They're very fussy eaters, as we've heard over and over. What's interesting is that the studies that the Noosa Biosphère Reserve Foundation and so forth going through their next round, where they're going to bring all the glossy experts. That's one of the things we're going to be talking about, obviously, is what differentiates a tree that the glossies like to eat versus one that they don't like to eat from, because they can be right next to each other, and we don't really know. There's a lot of things to learn about the glossies. So maybe this would be an opportunity for you, to monitor, plant the trees and which ones they go to.
That's why the ratio of 8 to 1 is, and they're off the actual feed trees. So hopefully, out of those 8 progeny, that one of them will become a feed tree. It's hedging your bets, but it's not perfect. I can't get into the minds of the glossies, and I don't know why they feed on that particular cone and not that one. So
I've just got a question. It's recommended that conditions 12 and 14 be amended to require the vegetation management operational works for approval on vegetation. Can you just explain what conditions are sought to be recommended for change out of 12 and 14?
So it's on page 33 of the report. It reflects the changed wording. You'll see that the after 12.37, the top, there was only one sentence there, and we've added actually in the rest of that text, what's in bold, and the condition 12.4 is a new condition, and then in terms of condition 14, it's just added the words "and staging." So the vegetation management operational works application must detail location and you say extent of vegetation. We're bringing in that staging element to the condition as well.
And for those at home listening, can you just tell us a little bit about and staging? Like, how is that going to work?
The current approval, the staging, the initial stage was over both lots, lot 6 and 9, and correct me if I'm wrong, the operational works approval was allowing the clearing of the site, because that first stage was going to be over both lots. Because it's now constrained stage 1 to that northern lot, if their initial works are constrained to stage 1, they'll only be able to remove the vegetation on that lot associated with that stage, and then as the conditions call for, the staging, the vegetation removal and offset management plan to now reflect the staging going forward.
So in summarising then, the people that are concerned about the entire block being cleared due to this can rest assured that that won't be the case, and the staging will protect.
So the vegetation removal will be reflective of the staging of the development. That's correct.
So stage 1 involves clearing 0.8 of a hectare of the site, and the rest of the staging is 4.6 hectares. This stage 1 is only 0.8 hectares, which does contain practically half of the glossy black food trees. So in stage 1, but I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. So
sorry, just a question. Is it unusual that you've got what's considered a vulnerable use, like the Blue Case approved land use? Is it unusual that this essential service is located in a bushfire prone area? And in the instance of a bushfire, are you satisfied that there's adequate provisions for vehicles to access the site?
Yes, we've had it reviewed by various bushfire consultants. When it was approved in 2011, it met the requirements at the time.
Yep.
And subsequent, through the minor changes that have gone on, we've asked them to refine their bushfire management plans and provide emergency access. And yeah, so they've ticked off on all the boxes on those ones. So yeah, so we're satisfied that it does meet the bushfire requirements and emergency services access.
And has that considered local traffic impact and how to negotiate that in the case of a bushfire?
It would have been part of the whole appraisal because the evacuation would have been considered and emergency access and egress have been considered. Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions. My recollection, there's only recollection, when we considered this matter last, we added a couple of conditions onto the staff recommendation. One about the use of glossy black feed trees in the street tree planting, and the other one was about requiring investigations into alternate bikeway and pedestrian access to the schools, particularly during construction. And back then it was about trying to achieve that at the operational work stage. Has this approval lost those, or do they still sit somewhere behind the scenes and carry on?
Yeah, they sit in the sort of the downstream approval process to do with the upgrade of the intersection. And with the upgrade of the intersection, there'll be traffic management plans that then guide the cyclists and the school kids to make sure that there's no conflict with construction traffic and the upgrading of that intersection. The subsequent downstream approval for the landscaping works will address the planting of glossy black food trees and other native street trees along that area.
Just occurred to me, stage 2, when is stage 2 anticipated to begin? And is the success of stage 1 dependent on stage 2 by any chance?
The success of stage 1, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I mean, like, are the two dependent on each other?
Well, the stage 1 is a residential aged care, high end kind of care.
Mm-hmm.
So it's independent of the.
Okay.
But ultimately, the way it will operate is that potentially you'll have people who are residents of the independent living apartments and units who may move into the residential aged care. They may seek to age in place and transition through the accommodation that's available on site, but I wouldn't say the success of the aged care is dependent upon that.
Okay, because you always worry that you start one and then stage. This happens in other countries a lot, where you give them the master plan and they only get halfway through.
Well, that's really why we're asking them to stage the clearing of the land. Mm-hmm. We're saying, well, you're doing this first, this must remain vegetated, because you don't know if they will ever proceed with the final stages.
Yeah, okay.
Because this is obviously for so many older people, we've got schools in such a close proximity. Are there increased cycleways, bikeways, walk paths for the older people to get out and do their exercise? Is that all included in the development? Yeah,
well, there's a 2 metre wide pathway network along Grasstree Court that's been included, and that links up to the Lexcen Drive upgrade. And then there's the internal network within the southern site of pedestrian and road access. But other than that, there's no additional networks around the area or upgrades around the area apart from the Grasstree Court and
the intersection.
Lexcen Drive upgrade.
With planning approvals, we're typically limited to only asking them to do their frontage.
Okay.
We can ask for some connection if it's not far away, but it becomes unreasonable if you're asking them to construct further on.
So, following on from that, there will be infrastructure contributions from this development, and historically in the Sunshine Coast Council era there was a study done to look at the desirability of a bikeway walkway between the residential development and the nature reserve. So if council in the future were to say that is a priority link, that will be something that development contributions could be put towards. Is that right?
If it
it's
is
trunk.
considered trunk infrastructure, yeah.
Are they funding along Lexcen Drive? Are they doing an upgrade?
Yeah, they're upgrading the intersection there. Currently, the northern corner of lot 6, which is the bottom lot, lot 9, needs to be upgraded. That whole intersection there is.
There's a road that goes through there at the moment which is being removed, and then that'll become just a one throat, that intersection, as opposed to what's there currently.
And the bus stop's being moved, and the new pedestrian link to the bus stop has been provided as well.
By them?
By them, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, question. We've discussed contribution towards the trunk infrastructure. Is there any conversation around the applicant making contribution towards something like the Burgess Creek regeneration program, where they're replanting the feed trees and things like that? Is there any?
It's outside the scope of this approval process to condition that.
Okay.
But within the ecological restoration plan, the applicant could propose that, and we'd be supportive of that if they wanted to amend their ecological restoration plan to include that as well.
Okay.
So
and how would that process work? Would that be in liaison with you or the community group, or?
Well, it'd be as part of a subsequent downstream approval, sort of like a landscaping approval or a ecological restoration plan approval.
Yeah.
And then we'd we'd endorse their plan, and that plan may have the Burgess Creek rehab group involved in it, or whatever they're proposing it. Yeah. So that is a possibility.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions?
Well, I hate to take all you guys' time here, but this is, they just told me, no, Tom, this is not the time to ask this. But obviously, this fits into the planning scheme, because it was approved a long time ago, and this will add a big chunk to our population, once the 2 phases are operational. That's obviously been considered in the 2020 Noosa plan, and that addition to population and that increased pressure on sewage treatment and all that. That's all been. We don't need to talk about that, because one, it doesn't really matter, but two, it's not at issue today, and it's already been taken care of.
Yeah. So to just respond to that, it is considered in the planning scheme, and council at the time back in the day actually owned the land and chose to rezone it to support an aged care facility on the site. Because of the high need for aged care in Noosa, we just didn't have the site. So to answer your question, yes, it has been considered in our planning for the area and the Shire and the needs for the Shire. This application, because it is a change, with change applications, council can really only respond. They have a valid approval. We can't take that away. So we can only respond today to the changes they're proposing. So we couldn't revisit that issue anyway if we had any concerns.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, yeah.
With regards to making changes to the valid application, with the current social environmental impacts from COVID and essential workers having to move outside the Shire for affordable accommodation, is there any way we can approach this applicant to consider moving forward opportunity for accommodation for workers in the health industry?
We can have that discussion with the applicant, but it would be really by their choice, because the need in Noosa is really about the high care, not so much the independent living. So certainly this stage is about building the high care in the first stage, which that's important for us to achieve, and that's great they're doing it the first stage. But we could look at the independent living units and have that discussion. But it would just be a discussion as to whether they were willing to make those changes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Would someone like to move the recommendation? Move Councillor Wagner. Second Councillor Stewart, would you like to talk to the motion? Anyone? I would. So we're in a position here where we have a significant conflict of planning objectives. And I've been on record before, and I want to go to record again, is that in my mind the 2016 decision, if it had come before council, I would not have supported an extension because I don't think the appropriate balance was reached between conservation and the need for aged care. That decision has been made and we're stuck with it. I do just want to point out that this is an ecosystem that occurs for just over 300 hectares and nowhere else in the world, other than a small patch on Stradbroke Island, and is endangered. So it's a very rare type of ecosystem, and that may be one of the factors leading into why the glossy blacks like it. Its proximity to wetlands, etc. It could also be that there's a different subspecies. There's research on weed species that find that, for example, camphor laurel, the subspecies can have very different toxicity in their leaves. That some species will be completely fine when landing in water, others will be toxic to the ecosystem. So, to me, just want to place on record that I believe the correct decision is as recommended, but that on a principle is that, you know, in the future when we do look at extending development approvals, that we do look at the multiple objectives and whether whether it is appropriate in cases like this to reconsider those broader objectives.
Can I ask a question?
You can ask the question anytime.
Are there other projects like this that are not built that we don't know that they're going to be there yet? Out there, are there other whoppers out there? For example, you know, we've got the Hoffman massive estate over there. You know, people are going to be very surprised when they see the trees cut down next to the Civic. What else is there? Because this, I mean, this is a surprise to me as well. You know, like we're driving past it, it's just...
Yeah, well, planning approvals under the Planning Act have a life of 6 years. So there are numerous approvals out there that are just sitting, waiting until the owner, I guess, feels that it's right to develop and proceed with the development. They can extend those approvals further, and when they're required, when they wish to do that, they have to make an application to council, and they're considered based on the planning framework at the time that they apply for that extension, like Hoffman. So there's a lot of approvals out there, not so much big ones, I'd say. You know, Hoffman's certainly a large scale one, this one's quite large. Sundale, which on McKinnon Drive, that's partly under construction now where they've been filling.
The extension of RACV is probably the one of most similar in that they're currently in appeal.
That's lapsed when they withdrew from the appeal.
They withdrew from the appeal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, there's some out there. Yeah, but I'd have to, I can produce a list from our system if councillors are interested in going through all the current approvals out there. But it'll include a range of, you know, duplex to houses, units, larger scale developments.
Okay. Just interesting, like we just following on from what Brian said, you know, again, as the elected officials, people, you know, going to be up in arms to say, you know, how did this happen? And they're going to look at us, and so of course we want to know.
Yeah.
Kerry, I've got a question. Just, you see council rezoned this a number of years ago because you saw the need for aged care. Is there the ability, or do we have the land that we can look at doing exactly the same thing with rezoning but for affordable housing? Because we know that there is such a need.
That is something council could consider doing. You know, we'd have to have a talk to our property section, see what land we hold that might be suitable for affordable housing. But that's certainly an option for council to consider.
Yeah. And if we were to lobby the state or Unity Water or something for some of their land, potentially then could we look at the same thing? Potentially if we were granted some land, looking at then rezoning that?
Yes, yeah, that's right. So we could look at building it ourselves and be the developer, or we could go into partnership with a housing provider. There'd be definitely options, and that would be a very, well, I think quite a valid thing for council to look at, because there is such a high need in Noosa for that.
So just to clarify, rezoning, very old-fashioned too.
Yeah.
We don't need to change the zone. We need to do a material change of use, depending what the existing zone is, as whether it's consistent or inconsistent.
Yeah, council with this one though did go through a process of changing the zoning. But yeah, rezoning is old.
You need to do an MCU.
I still use it. I have to say, even as a planner, I still use it occasionally.
Okay.
That's just enough. Thank you.
Given the comments you just made to this, are we able to move this forward to the next meeting to widen this out to the other councillors? Or
Happy to. Everyone thinks that's a good idea? Refer it to general in case other councils wish to make a
Yeah.
contribution? Okay.
Thank you.
So that's a motion by Councillor Finzel due to the significance of the matter. Moved by Councillor Finzel, a seconder, Councillor Stewart. You don't wish to discuss that anymore, do you?
No, I don't.
All those in favour? That was carried unanimously.
Thank you.
We then move on to material change use 190134, planning
Thanks,
environment
Colin.
court
Thank
appeal.
you.
D67 refusal of an application for a bar at 5 Terrace Court, Cooroy. There is one of my favourite reports dealing with an appeal in the agenda.
I'm glad you're liking it.
I just think these ones should be all confidential.
Oh, yeah.
Fred overrides me, so. Do we have any questions?
I do. I just noticed that the timing had been significantly, there'd been an agreement to reduction in the hours for the tasting bar. Is that correct, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
So they've significantly reduced their operating hours
Yeah, so, yeah.
to really address and show council that it's genuine tasting. It's not just going to be a general bar.
And also they're only providing their own wines, aren't they? Beers.
Yeah.
they're
So
not-
their proposal was that for purchase on site, their only liquor sold would be liquor that they're producing.
Yeah.
So it really is about supporting the distillery on site.
And the courtesy bus that they have to have, is that at their own cost?
Yes, and that was their proposal as well. So it was addressing the issue that was raised by the refusal, in that it was some distance out of town and there wasn't a lot of public transport. So they proposed that they would offer a small bus, courtesy bus service to their patrons.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead?
No.
Obviously, I'm excited about this. I think this is a good decision, which I'm also excited about because I live in Cooroy.
Are you declaring a conflict?
But thinking of the word spirit and a distillery making a product that they want to display, and it seems, I believe, along with where our industrial zones can be going towards the enterprise style of where we encourage the makers of the products to also be able to market their products and affiliated products from their industrial place. And here we're going to be now allowing them to do that, which is to sample the product, buy their product, sell the product they make right there. It's very entrepreneurial. It's very small business, and in the German lexicon, it's what we call a Mittelstand, which is the business owner making the product, selling the product, having a very.
Excuse me, Councillor, we are in a relaxed committee, but have you got a question or are you making a comment?
But my question is, would you agree that in order to this is great because you're look at normal products you can see, but when it comes to a spirit, you can't really see it because it's just clear, especially in the beginning phases. So you're actually testing the spirit in order to look at the product and to analyze whether it's a good product or so forth. Usually, when you're buying fruit, you just look at the fruit. When you buy a product, you're looking at a spirit. The only way to test it is to drink it. So I'm very happy that we are that we're letting people actually test the product and feel the product in the only way possible. And then of course having a bar, or not a bar, but a testing area there, along with other people, you are testing the spirit in the element of where the spirit will be used, which is in a social situation. And then the word spirit itself actually is a great word because it means the product, but it also means after when you drink it, you feel it, and you feel how the liquid affects your spirit as it goes down. So it's I feel it's really important, and it's really a step forward towards an enterprise industrial area.
Well, I'll just make
In the spirit
a
of this being an informal committee, I think that's a question.
Okay, I'll just make a comment that officers were always very supportive of tastings occurring on the site. What we were cautious about is about allowing a retail component from the site, because we have limited industrial land and industrial uses are very difficult to locate. So I'm pleased we've been able to reach agreement with the applicant, and he's scaled back his proposal to something that we can support, and that will support his business and the industrial use that's occurring on the site.
So if I can follow up on that question to me and clarify if this is where the change in staff recommendation comes from. There's been a reduction in the size of the area. There's been a reduction in the hours of the area to a point where you have considered this use is now an ancillary use to the industry rather than a retail use which would stand alone operate.
Exactly.
And that is the difference which you now consider that is sufficiently in compliance with the planning scheme under which it was submitted.
Yeah, great summary.
So adding to that, Kerry, this decision's confirmed, changed or broadened our understanding of what is an ancillary use?
We're saying that it's going to operate in an ancillary capacity. They still need the approval for a bar, so the application still needed to be made for the bar, but it will really operate as ancillary, not standalone and be the main attractor for the business. The primary business here is the distillery, the industrial use component.
So, in the report, and I think this goes to the acting director, because it has to do with the business model, which was enumerated in the report. And in the report, it talks about some of the financial reasons during the startup process that the applicant has put forward for why they needed this retail component. Could you clarify the weight we can be placed on this requirement? I think Section 45 and Section 60 of the Act are the two areas of importance.
I was actually just going to comment on the economics of this proposal. So I'll be interested by the changes that the team have kind of come up with. I haven't got that section yet, but does the size of model now, is it going to be commercially viable? I'll
then go to the development manager. Can we consider in this application whether the model is now financially viable or not under Section 45 or Section 60 of the Act?
Yeah, the planning legislation specifically prohibits us from considering a person's personal circumstances, including financial. The reason I have included it in the report for reference was I was very interested to see that their primary their business model is about wholesaling, so that's the reason for it.
So the argument of putting it in was that was part of the argument to determine it was ancillary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just thought so. I just wanted to ask a question of the acting director.
Can I just add? I think quite seriously, I think that this is something that we're going to be faced with more and more, is that diverse revenue streams for businesses to survive. So it's interesting now we've scaled this back to be compliant in all respects and acceptable within that environment. So I think it'd be really interesting in 6 months, a year in, how does that model work for them as a business? Because if it works well, that obviously gives us much more confidence saying, well, that the scale is not the issue, because what it does, it potentially could force the core business is about distilling and probably exporting and other opportunities. So be interesting to watch how this actually works out on this scale.
How are the sales going with the rest of the units around it? Is there any indications of what else will be in the small industrial units surrounding it?
We had any inquiries? They've recently, I think, completed just doing a building format plan. So they've created titles for each of the tenancies. So I think now that they've created those, we might see a little bit of movement, people taking them up. But I haven't seen any particular inquiries from anyone else. Yeah, but the current development approval for industrial uses on the site allows for a range of uses. So
it would have been 6 months ago the landowner communicated to me that he was very confident in the demand.
Yeah.
For the units he's constructing. Yeah.
Okay. My vision for that area in the hinterland is hopefully facilitating micro farms and so forth. And I could see, and I hope to see, some of those units being used for the processing of locally produced farm agriculture into whatever chutneys and things that you could sell all over the place, and then really leveraging off the Noosa brand. So that's why I get excited about this, because a lot of the food places will have an ancillary part of their business as selling, on-selling the food that they're creating there, you know, to the wholesaling, to the public, or to the public and so forth.
Yeah, certainly the size of the tenancy suggests it lends itself to that sort of business.
So just further to that, we're doing, I guess, two things. One is an industrial land audit. We're updating that over the next probably 6 months. That will include both I guess, greenfield, but also what is the actual tenancy of these type of facilities. And the other side around the economic development strategy review. So food hubs, especially in hinterland, I'm sure will be one consideration. What we've done at the digital hub is their equivalent hinterland food hub. So, and especially given our land holdings in that area, maybe that's something that we expand on.
That would be terrific, yeah.
So, I suppose that leads to my question. Under Noosa Plan 2020, this development was zoned for medium impact industry, which are the ones with more potential for noise, smell, loud activities, things that are consistent with industrial zones. I don't think it's anything in there at the moment, but this item's been, I've asked it to go to general because I think it's of broader significance. Is there something we can do, whether by condition or notation, that identifies the business can only expect an amenity consistent with an industrial estate, and that the ancillary use will not be considered in determining future uses in the estate?
Yeah, I think that would be a good advisory note rather than a condition, because it doesn't require them to do anything. So, but that's something we could add.
Yeah, I think that's just important. That
it just makes it clear for the future for this business owner.
That's right. Yeah. So if a surfboard manufacturer using fiberglass sets up next door and has those sort of acidic swirls coming through, we're not going to say stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll draft something for general for you.
Yeah. So, any other questions before we just move that motion to go to? Okay, so I'll move that the matter be referred to the General Committee due to the significance of the issue. Seconded by Councillor Wagner. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We then go on to planning applications decided by Delegated Authority for September 2020, and can we note that Councillor Lawrenson has left the room, please? And I believe we may have others who may wish to declare an interest.
I, Councillor Stewart, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter in relation to the application by Belmondo's Pty Ltd. I have a relationship with one of the owners of the company, Jackson Taylor, as Jackson and his wife live in my neighbourhood and our families have on occasion socialised together. However, I do not consider them to be close personal friends. Although I have a declarable conflict of interest, I do not believe a reasonable person could have a perception of bias, because I do not consider that I have a close personal relationship with Mr. Taylor. The decision that Council is being asked to make in regard to this application is not to approve or reject it. It is to only note the decision that has already been made by Council staff. Therefore, I will choose to remain in the meeting room. However, I will respect the decision of the meeting on whether I can remain and participate in the decision.
Okay, and before we deal with that one, I believe there's another declaration as well.
That's me. I, Councillor Wagner, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter in relation to the application by Sunshine Butterflies, as on 23rd of October 2020, I provided them with a donation of surfboard making equipment valued at approximately $1,200. Although I have a declarable conflict of interest, I do not believe a reasonable person could have a perception of bias, because I do not have any other association with that organization, and the decision that Council is being asked to make in regards to this application is not to approve or reject it. It is to only note the decision that has already been made by Council staff. Therefore, I choose to remain in the room. However, I will respect the decision of the meeting on whether I can remain and participate in the decision.
Can I just have a clarification in terms of the completeness of your declaration? On the 23rd of October was when you provided the donation, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, not when that's fine. Okay, so neither Councillor Stewart or Councillor Wagner can now participate, so Councillor Finzel and I, we rule the kingdom. So, would you like any questions of either of the councillors who declared?
I'm satisfied with the information they've provided.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm happy to move the declaration by Councillor Stewart. Would you like to second it?
I'll second that.
Would you like to discuss?
Yeah, I'm happy for Councillor Stewart to remain in the room for the remainder of the conversation.
I think the declaration is self-evident, and what we're considering has no impact. I also support it, and it's my closing debate. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. And we move on to the declaration by Councillor Wegner. I'm happy to move this one. I believe he can stay in the room.
Do you want to read it out, Brian?
Okay. The council note the declarable conflict of interest by Councillor Wegner and determine that it is in the public interest that Councillor Wegner participates and votes on this matter because council believes that Councillor Wegner does not have a close association with Sunshine Butterflies, and given it is not required to approve or reject the application, only noted a reasonable person would trust that the final decision is made in the public interest. I'm happy with that.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, all those in favour? Carried unanimous. No, you can't.
No.
But you now can participate. Okay, so it goes back to the item. Do we have any questions? No? Anyone? Would someone like to move the recommendation then? Move Councillor Wegner. Councillor Stewart has seconded. Would you like to discuss any of those items? No? Only I think it's good for transparency now that we'll get those every month and people in the public can see what's happening around their notebooks and their shire.
Actually, I do have a question, and this came up when we were talking about the short-term stays and whether the decisions, whether or not staff decides to permit or grant Airbnb or short stay status to a low, what is it called, to a new residence, you know, a low. There's there's middle, medium, and density.
Low density residential.
Yeah.
There's
Low
a
density.
yeah.
So the question was, there will be applications for short-term stay at low density housing. Will those come through here? Will they be a part of the list in the future?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
There's none here, probably because
we didn't decide any that month. Yeah.
Yeah, but they will show up in here.
Yeah, and we have had I think about 5 applications now under the superseded planning scheme for requests to accept short-term accommodation in the low-density residential zone. Some council officers have supported and some we have not. For those that we have not, we've actually spoken with the applicant, explained our reasons, and the applicant's chosen to withdraw their application. So you may not see those ones on the agenda, but you'll see the ones that we have supported.
If we do see something there, like that we have questions about, could we actually can have questions about these?
Yes.
About them.
Yeah.
And if we had questions and some of us in the majority said we don't approve of this particular one here, would that mean that we vote against all of them? You know, or not noted? What happens if one of them we have a problem? You know, the majority has a problem with.
So the decision's been made by officers, so you cannot rescind a decision once it's been made, so you wouldn't be able to change the outcome there. So this report really is about noting those applications that have been decided by officers for that month.
Okay.
So if you found, you know, going forward that you weren't happy with a number of decisions officers were making, we could look at the delegations and review those.
You would review the delegation.
And you would ask for those sorts of items to come to council for a decision.
Okay. And then when this is when this comes to us, if we want to look further into something, then I email you and say, oh look, can I look into the material change, blah blah blah. You know,
yeah,
particular
that would be great if you give me a heads up before the meeting, because whilst I am familiar with most of them, sometimes I don't have all the detail around them.
Okay.
So if you can give me a heads up, I can bring further detail to the meeting for it to be discussed, including putting plans up if you wish.
And this is the first time this has happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so previously officers have only just emailed councillors every month with the list of delegations, and I think Councillor Stockwell said it's a good chance so the community get to see it, a bit of further transparency.
And one thing you can do is you can just, like I did just previously on the aged care facility, you can just put on the public record that you would have thought differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so has that been moved and seconded? It has. Any further discussion? Whoever the mover was, do you wish to close?
This is a big change to have these public, to put public like this. It is a really big change, and I think that it will give the opportunity for people. Obviously, they can't change a decision made, but give more direction. So it actually is a good democratic step forward for bringing the public in on what is happening in the direction of council, and making actually probably all of us a bit more responsive to the community.
All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We then go to item 5, which is the Environment and Sustainable Development Department update first quarter, and we normally just go through this page by page, item by item. If you wish to raise a question or query or make a statement, just bring it to my attention. I'll just read out the left-hand column.
That's it.
And I'll get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Here we go. So, COVID-19 business support response, tourism Noosa collaboration.
Just a small note as a member of the board of directors for the Noosa Biosphere Reserve Foundation, I'd just like to point out that the funding for the Noosa Trail program largely came from a delegation from the Noosa Biosphere Reserve Foundation.
Yes.
That paid for the report in the beginning. So just a little bit of, you know, what up, respect.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. About 80% of the funding came from Biosphere, wasn't it? The Biosphere Fund.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Obviously, people are getting sick of me, you know, talking about this, but we have so many community groups here that we're looking at, and look at these pages and pages, and funding them. You know, some things do need to be funded, and there seems to be just the Biosphere Reserve Foundation and Tourism Noosa seem to be the community groups that have some funding or considerable funding from council. And I will say that seeing how incredibly busy council is, and actually I think Amelia and I have been talking about how, and Karen, how understaffed it appears the council is. Like we actually, you know, the amount of work that goes through, the importance of the community groups, and the value we get out of the community groups, like Tourism Noosa, like the Biosphere Reserve Foundation. The money that you give them seems to really come back as a really solid investment. Okay,
Agree.
Okay. Good. Social and community housing. I'll just mention there, it's not in conflict with your report in terms of you saying what's up is continued to progress, the important issue, I suppose, for public exposure. We have had a workshop as that was identified there, and there was an agreement that staff would prepare a report coming to council probably early in the new year about a policy on council's role and responsibilities and direction in terms of assisting meet what is now, I believe, a crisis in this community.
Yep.
Implementation of the Zen organisation strategy, private land conservation partnerships, land for wildlife voluntary conservation agreements.
Again, looking at it at the next page at the bottom, the 16 active working groups, 82 working bees, 933 volunteer working hours, 655 plants in the ground, and 9 new volunteers recruited. That is, you know, that's huge amount of effort, you know, put in by our voluntary organizations and so forth. And one more thing. Sorry I'm talking so much, you guys. This is I never do. The Keep It in Kinkin. Anthony, I had a talk with some of the others in the environmental levy and group, and one of the concepts is to buy land that actually has been degraded, or like around the Keep It in Kinkin, because there's so much demand for planting trees that in the lands that we buy that are already forested, well, we're not actually planting trees, and to take advantage of the planting trees aspect and the rehabilitation aspect of what we're doing. We have these tracts in Kinkin, and of course the farmers, well, they don't want to sell them, but because it's a big giant rural property, because they were talking about the VCAs and the other aspect. The third pillar is the changing of zoning, or taking the rural block and a lot of going to conservation and then making a part of it a rural residential block. And that program is called, so bad.
No, the split zoning
Split
is,
zoning.
I think, what you're talking about, where the landholder, it doesn't change the balance zone. The landholder can voluntarily say, this is the area that I valued, I want to put in an environmental protection zone. So just then, that's the cheapest, easiest mechanism to get a level of protection over there. Could be, most of it will be the forested area at the back of their block or along the creek or whatever. So it's just an option that I think it's in there under.
Is that the voluntary?
Conservation.
That's a voluntary conservation.
Yeah.
But there's the other one where Brett was talking about whether you can actually rezone a chunk of the land, rural residential, put a house on it, you could sell the house off and give the land to.
That is, you're there talking about our policy in terms of revolving fund.
Yeah.
So if council were to buy a block of land which had significance over part of it, or we wanted to rehabilitate, we could buy that block of land, we could achieve the outcome that we wanted for conservation, and then either keep that or sell the whole block back again with part of it with that protection or that increased conservation value there.
Yeah.
So that's a decision of council. So one of the blocks that we currently own is an area that's already been looked at there, and then the money earned from that could go to buy the next lot and to keep on getting maximum turnover of the environment levy dollar.
Yeah, Brett brought that up early on as something he was really pushing for. And the more I drive around Kinkin, and you see the creeks falling in on themselves, and that's where really it seems a lot of effort is needed. Plus, that land doesn't seem to be producing all that much, from my perspective. And maybe by doing the revolving fund, letting somebody have a rural residential piece of land there that they could put a business on and so forth, and then the rest of it let land care rehabilitate, get the green dollars in, and just going from that. I know that's something that I'm talking to the environmental levy group about.
Yeah, I think that that's a strategic review, isn't it, of the use of the environmental levy to purchase land, and there's two mechanisms you can use, but I think it does come into, is there any connection there with land rehabilitation protection or even affordable housing? So I think is there any strategic connection to environmental levy and land purchase rather than the purchase of forest? Is right.
Yeah.
And I think it's a whole review of the strategy and policy around environmental levy, purchase of land.
Yeah. But I know it's a topic that
it's a big topic.
The policy was amended to allow what you're proposing to occur. What occurs on the balance lot will depend on the zoning in the balance lot, basically. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on. I think you were talking both to private land conservation and community bushland care. Any others? Ural ringtail, pest management, Noosa River Plan.
I've got a question about the next one, right?
Okay. The Nature Conservation Partnership, Bring Back the Fish.
Anthony, where are we at with state permits? Do you know?
Probably need to take on notice with Craig.
Yeah.
Just state permits.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were supposed to get them by June, July, and it's been pushed out to the end of December. So I know we're in November, so it's not far till the end of December. So I'm just wondering where we're at with that.
I'll ask that one, Craig.
Thank you.
And I'd like to ask the same question in regards to the Noosa River Plan, the Noosa River Stakeholder Group. That's taken some time, and do you know where we're up to with that, Anthony?
Yeah, it is in the report. I know that Craig's working with state government on that. I'll just go to, it is in here. Is it further? It's under the river plan, yeah. So yeah, I guess Craig, in that last column, report to council summary of feedback in terms of reference for the Noosa River stakeholder group, and that's under next steps, isn't it? I'm just getting on top of the next quarter. Bring together stakeholder group in partnership with Maritime Safety Queensland. So my understanding is that Craig is, the time frame is really dependent on the Maritime Safety Queensland group. We're trying to align all our activities, so that has been a bit of, I guess, a delay in that, but next quarter, which will be new year, report to council and summary feedback. So that's the status.
Yeah, I've had a conversation with Craig asking the same question.
Okay.
His view is that if possible to integrate the state government consultation group and our group, it will help really bed down those issues in the river plan that are currently state government responsibilities, and that if we can make that so that both parties are satisfied, and obviously that's just taking a little bit longer.
Councillors, might just bring it to your attention that in the report that's going to this afternoon's meeting on the progress of the operational plan, there is actually an update here, and Kylie's got it up on the screen, which might help, which will give you some additional information as well. So, would you like me to read it, Kylie?
I think that's basically what we've said.
Yeah, and that's it.
And acknowledge that it's behind schedule.
Yeah.
However, I also talked to Craig. I was thinking about how the oysters are, the oyster reefs, the oysters that have been eating in the shells of the oysters, and they're piling up and drying out nicely. And so we will, at least that part is going well, where they've got oysters up and drying. And then I encouraged them to invite all of us to do our social civic responsibility in eating lots of oysters.
Yes, get fat for rehabilitation. Yeah.
And visit the Cooroy distillery.
Well, you know, yeah.
Well, in fact, historically in the late 1800s, oyster saloons were very popular throughout the world, but in the peak of the oyster production. Okay, so we move on to Bushland Reserve Management, Noosa Trail Network. Just a question there, and it might come up, it's probably a Craig one, but you may know, as part of the stimulus package we did advertise for trainees to go into the natural area team. Is that process finalised, or and will they be working in places like the trail?
I will check, but I thought I heard that there was a number have been taken on. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but I'd have to. I'll get
certainly
Craig down to
advertised.
that
I would
as
have
well.
presumed by now that appointment process.
I think he might have taken on 4 people, but we'll just double check on that.
Okay.
I've just got a comment about that. There's been questions back from community with regards to the funding for the Noosa Trail, and there seems to be some mixed messages around like who's actually got the lead on that. Like people are coming back thinking that it's Noosa Biosphere or the trail or the council, and confusion over the cycle pathway as opposed to the trail. So I'm just wondering how communication is going to be put out to community to clarify how these trails and walkways and horseways are going to be.
So Noosa Council has received the funding, 1.6 million
Yeah.
trails, 1.6. That is sitting with infrastructure under Carl as the, I guess, the project manager and the holder of the funds, and then Craig Eldridge organises the PCG, or the project group, which is, I guess, the key person there is Peter Milne around the natural areas, and so that's kind of, there is a structure. So it is council, it's under infrastructure. Between cycleways and the trail itself, I haven't got an answer on that, but certainly council is the project manager of that. I don't know if I'm not sure if we've obviously haven't put too much media out on it then, so maybe it's something that we do need to just clarify what's in, what's out, what our focus is for the next 6 months.
So
I think
I've actually raised it with both infrastructure and Peter.
Yeah.
So it's, I think project control group for the walking and cycling
Yes.
strategy. I think it's going to be really important to have people understand there's a cycling walking strategy.
Yeah.
One of the elements of that is implementing the Noosa Trail. There's a whole lot of other commuter bikeways and walkways that are separate to the Noosa Trail, and there are 2 different council departments, but it's all part of the one strategy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've noted that.
Yeah, it is.
On media, on just clarifying the communication on
Yeah,
who's doing what, when, where.
Yeah.
it would be good to talk to Ken.
Yeah.
Okay. Noosa Plan 2020, whole of Shire climate change response. Oh, good. Business as usual. Local economic plan implementation.
Oh, thank God for that. I'm here.
I think I'm going to ask Kerry this question.
I'm not acting director.
No, I suppose I've raised it before, but I think maybe we should start thinking about it in all communications going forward from this point. Every other policy, strategy, plan document at the level in the policy hierarchy, in environment, social, etc., is transfer. It's all called strategy, and it is setting a 20 to 25 year time frame, of which then there are subsequent 5-year action plans. I think in terms of we have to think about this is, do we start talking about the local economic strategy review process? And I also then the question I had, I know that the COVID business roundtable is morphing into it. When we did develop the local economic recovery plan, it wasn't just representatives of business groups that sat on that group. There was also people with economic or particular skills and expertise that may contribute, that was involved in the stakeholder reference group, and there was also a representative from the community. And if you look at our old economic sector boards, we always had that sort of mix, and so we started thinking about that more generally.
I totally agree with the plan versus strategy of policy. I think we just need to get that right, and what is it? So I think that should be part of the review process. Where does it sit in the hierarchy? So I agree with that. The approach around consultation, we're taking a very staged approach, and agree again that the Business Roundtable are one representative group of certain locations more than anything. And Deb and myself have talked about, there's a sector. While the Chamber actually do have portfolios now within the Chamber, constructions there and retail, there's still a gap on some other areas. So the way
Clean tech industry group, for example.
Yeah, clean tech and the digital groups that are involved in. So the Business Roundtable is one big representative group who will inform and contribute to the strategy, let's call it. But I fully expect and starting to plan to who else, and the who else are special interest groups. How do we not just say here's a 90% draft? Here's we've got to this point. We think the big issues are here. What's the gaps? What's your thoughts? So, like I said, we've got 5 network groups coming out of the digital hub now. They're all different parts of the tech sector. So that's an important group. We've also got a founders group out of there. The founders group are basically, high-end investors, or they are, ones with capital. So they're another group. And then you've got sector groups, and then you've got the wider community. So, we need to do a more detailed consultation plan, and that's kind of coming together, and that's a pre-Christmas. Let's see how that will look. But yeah, agree and accept those. Is it a plan? Is it a strategy? A policy? Let's get that right. And then at what stage do interested parties or general community get a say and that contribution to the vision and the outcome?
Very good. Anyone else on that one? We move on.
Or just a quick note, infrastructure investment and reskilling programs, and just to note agriculture. It seems that's the hardest one, and Brian's been pushing this for his entire life, and Karen and I are talking about just how much we'd like to see the micro agriculture here in Noosa, but it just seems that there's so many barriers. For example, if we be on somebody else's private land and all that, and but it just seems as though that's another reskilling priority area, which is very difficult.
So agriculture and agribusiness.
Yeah.
Again, I think that when we get down to which sectors, again, I agree, and potentially, it's at the moment it's potentially that value add side of things. The advanced manufacturing of food and the breweries, for example, or bona fide broth. I don't know if you know that one down in Noosaville. They're an interesting one. So, Tom, I think that there's a lot. It's a natural asset, agribusiness, agriculture, sustainable farming, regenerative farming, etc. So that whole supply chain, value chain has to come out in this strategy and how we address it and engage with it.
Is there a farmer at the round table?
A farmer at the round, well, I would say not that I'm aware of. So that would be, but who you've got food kin. So you've got food supply chain, but you don't have a farmer at the round table.
So is Jetty at the round table?
Yes, she
She's
is.
at the
She's a farmer.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
She's
she
got
has,
pigs.
she's
Was it
vertically
pigs? Or was
integrated,
there
so,
pork? Wasn't it?
not the pigs anymore, but used to, but
Yeah.
cattle and
Yeah. So there's this. I mean, the round table is never going to represent every sector and every. I get that it's vertical, and that's what the gaps that we need to find. But yeah, I suppose that certainly Jodie will bring a bit of the farming knowledge, but we need more than that. We need to dig deeper into some of those sectors and farming and production. But rather than value adds, we've probably got there's the processing side, there's representation, and kind of we've got a lot more understanding of that. But the pure production of food is something that still needs to be brought back to the table on what do we do now. And we've worked closely with Country Noosa over the last 3-4 years. We've funded stuff, we've partnered with that organisation. So we certainly haven't been outside of the agribusiness sector. We've worked alongside it. It's just where we go next.
I think a lot of this stuff, even with the strategy, if we do get up to that higher level of policy setting, is do we look at prioritising industries or sectors, or do we prioritise value chains and identify where in this value chain can we make a significant difference to improve the economic output or the number of jobs? And that, even in tourism, that's I think a significant difference in the way we think about tourism. Not that it's the biggest industry we want to diversify, but is there something we can do as a council in the tourism value chain that will, with a modest amount of investment, have a bigger degree of impact? Okay, business support and development, industry and sector development.
They actually, you do mention agri-food there as a current priority.
Communications and marketing plan, leadership and strategy program, business as usual activities. And move on to development assessment, local government infrastructure plan for next planning scheme. Do we want to change that title?
Should be for planning
Thinking ahead, Brian.
Auditing program for advertising devices, business as usual activities, more business as usual, but this time for building and plumbing and building audit, educational programs and swimming pool immersions, compliance approvals, council and community, electronic plumbing application project, and that's it. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Move Councillor Stewart and a seconder, Councillor Finzel. Is there any discussion? No. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Now, our next item is listed as a confidential session, but it has been, I've suggested it refers to general committee. If we don't wish to discuss it, then there's no need to go into confidential session. So is there anyone who would like to discuss it? You would?
Just a couple of questions.
Yeah, well, okay, so you can't. So we'll need a motion to go to close the meeting to the public. Have you got the wording there ready for us? Would you like to move that, Councillor Wegner?
Yes.
So if you might want to read it out.
That the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to section 254J3E of the Local Government Regulation 2012 for the purpose of discussing legal advice relating to an appeal in the Planning and Environment Court, so that council's legal position is protected in relation to item 6, Planning and Environment Court Appeal number D144 of 219, the application for building works at 54 Seaview Terrace, Sunshine Beach.
I'm happy to second that. Do you wish to discuss? What do we discuss? Those in favour? The motion's carried unanimously. we're waiting for that to come back on.
Another meeting,
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
maybe.
And that the motion, we're right. Is there someone wish to move the motion that the Planning Environment Committee agenda item 6 be referred to the General Committee due to the condition of the issue? Councillor Fenzel has moved that. I can second it. There's no need for discussion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously, and the meeting is closed.